Prairie Yard and Garden is a production of the University of Minnesota Morris in cooperation with Pioneer Public Television. Funding for Prairie Yard and Garden is provided in part by Heartland Motor Company, providing service for over 30 years in the heart of truck country. Heartland Motor Company, we have your best interest at heart. Farmers Mutual Telephone Company and Federated Telephone Cooperative, proud to be powering ASERA. Mark and Margaret Yankel-Julien, in honor of Shalom Hill Farm, a nonprofit rural education retreat center in a beautiful prairie setting near Windham in southwestern Minnesota. Shalom Hill Farm, shalomhill.org. Diamond Willow Advanced Care Assisted Living, providing custom homes with smaller settings designed especially for high care needs.
In the spring of the year, we get so excited to get out and work in the yard or just be outside after the long winter. We get a nice sunny day and off we go, forgetting to put on sunscreen. Well, it only takes about 30 minutes for me to realize how much power that sun has and that I'm getting sunburned. I'm Mary Holm, host of Prairie Yard and Garden, and today we are going to learn about Bee-u-tiful solar power. Come and see what I mean. It's getting to be more common to see homes with solar panels or even energy farms with acres of solar panels. Last year, I read an article about a company who combined solar panels with a planting for pollinators. Well, you know me and plants. I just had to find out more. So today we are visiting with Brian of Connexus Energy. Welcome, Brian.
Welcome, Mary, to the Connexus Community Solar Garden.
Tell me about Connexus Energy.
Connexus Energy, we're the largest member-owned electrical cooperative in Minnesota. We serve 1,000 square miles in the North Metro. It's a portion of 7 counties, 54 cities and townships.
How did you get started with pollinators and even with solar energy? Let's start with the solar part.
Back in 2013-14, there was interest from the membership for Connexus to increase our renewable portfolio, and that's why this community solar garden was built based upon the member request. So in 2014, this 245 kW system was built, and as a result of that, it evolved where we planted native prairie grasses beneath the solar panels.
How do solar panels work?
In the simplest form, the sun's energy comes to the earth in the form of photons. The solar panels convert photons to electrons in DC. Those DC electrons then go to an inverter where we convert them to AC, where ultimately the AC power goes back onto the grid to serve the homes and businesses of Connexus.
Do the solar panels turn with the sun or are they stationary?
Our array with what's known as a fixed array. There are tracking systems that track the sun as the day goes on, but what we have is a fixed array here.
Do they generate energy even on a cloudy day like we're having today?
It's a good question. So today it's overcast and there's a little bit of sprinkling. And yes, we still generate electricity on days like this. Not as much, but we still generate electricity on days like this.
Is there a way to store the energy for at nighttime use?
Not with this array, but we are in the process of developing 2 more sites that are 40 times the size of this, that are combined solar plus storage. We'll be using the storage batteries to align the renewable production of the solar panels with our system peaks, which are typically late afternoon, early evening. So as the sun's going down, the solar production is dwindling. To increase the monetary benefit of the solar system, you align that production with the batteries over our system peak. So this will be the first solar plus storage project in the upper Midwest. We're doing 10,000 kW of solar, so 40 times what we have here, charging 15,000 megawatts of batteries with 30,000 megawatt hours.
I suppose when all of us, like me, get home from work and then we start washing clothes and we fix supper and everything, and that's when the energy consumption rises.
You are exactly correct. So it's that residential member who lives in the home, cooking, cleaning, living in the home, in addition to the retail and the manufacturing load, that drives our system peak.
Now, you must have infrastructure that goes into the ground and transfers that energy to converters.
You are correct. So the sun's energy comes to the panels. It gets converted to DC here. It goes underground to the inverter. The inverter converts DC energy to AC. That AC energy then goes through a step-up transformer. So it's an alternating current, the power we supply to homes and businesses, and it goes back onto the distribution grid through that transformer.
When you did a pollinator planting here, whose idea was that?
It was actually an internal idea. The original plans were to have aggregate. That's how we built substations. Rock. The staff that sits closest to the windows looking out didn't want to look at rock. This is the true story. They suggested we do native prairie grasses. And the secret about this is actually less expensive to have native prairie grasses than to have rock beneath the solar garden.
Really?
It's actually less expensive to install the prairie grass and maintain it versus buying the rock and having that spread and put down.
How did you come up with the idea of having bees also?
It's part of the evolution. If you have prairie grasses and calling it pollinator habitat, the natural evolution would be to have bees to monetize and benefit the pollinators you have here. Our manager of construction and maintenance, he's an amateur beekeeper, and he lives nearby, and he actually has his hives here in conjunction with Bolton bees, yes.
Were there any regulations or anything that you had to go through in order to get the permits in order to do a prairie planting? And then also, what do the surrounding people that live near here think about this?
There are no regulations for having the plantings of pollinator habitat, but I will tell you, it is definitely a benefit. Going through the process to get these next two sites permitted, which are, again, are 40 times the size of here, we actually had a planning commissioner state to us after prairie restoration explained to him what we're planting. It sounds like we're getting a park out of this deal as well. They were very enthusiastic about the pollinator habitats.
What do your employees think about it?
There's a lot of enthusiasm around it. When we harvest the honey, the amount of people that come out for the honey harvesting is greater than other events we have in the same venue.
How about when your employees must have to come out and do maintenance here on the panels? Has anybody gotten stung or anybody that had problems at all?
So in the time we've had the bees, we've had 0 issues with people being stung, and we do multiple tours inside of the garden where people come see the honey, and with the harvest of the honey when the bees are out, and no one has been stung, so it's not been an issue with the maintenance of the facilities.
When you build this new facility, are you going to do a native planting there too?
Yes, and we have visions of doing more solar than just the 10 megawatts we're adding this summer, and as we go, we will definitely be adding native prairie grasses.
Well, this has been so interesting. Do you think it would be okay for us to visit with the company that did the planting of the prairie plants too?
That would be great. I would encourage you to do that because they know more about the native grasses than I do.
I'm with Mike from Prairie Restorations, and your company did all the plant work here at the solar farm. Is that correct?
Correct.
How in the world did you prepare the soil for planting?
Well, the first step was we had to get rid of the invasive species that were on site. So we had to come out and do a herbicide application that takes care of those species. So once those died back, we came out here with a mower and basically mowed everything down to the ground to try and get rid of all the thatch and dead material. Then, because we have nice sandy soils here, all we really needed to do was come in here with a harrow and a rake behind a tractor and kind of scarify the surface. And so the harrow was a little bit offset, so we were able to get under the panels a little bit. So that's very, very helpful. But it did involve some hand labor as well, some hand raking.
Did you add any compost or peat moss or anything to the soil?
No, that's the great thing about natives is you can match the species to the soils that you have. And we love sandy soils because they're great to work with. So basically we didn't do a thing as far as fertilizers or peat or compost. We use what was here and it works great.
My question now is, did you use seed or did you use plants in here or did you do both?
This particular project we just used seed. We came up with a couple of diverse mixes, one for the open sunny aisles in between the rows, and then another kind of more shade tolerant mix for underneath the panels. So on some restoration projects you do use plants, but on this particular one we stuck with seed.
Well, that was what I was wondering. There's so much infrastructure here, you know, to hold the panels
Right.
up and then the wiring and everything. So how did you even get the seed down underneath there?
We've got these really cool broadcasters that attach to the back of our tractor, and they have a wand behind them that has this kind of motion, and so it kind of flings the seed, and it works great for solar projects. And we've done a lot of these projects now, but it throws the seed under the panels as well as in the aisles. And then after the seed has been placed, we go back over it with the harrow and do the raking again, kind of incorporate it into the soil a little bit. So the last step, just to kind of finish that process, was we covered it with straw mulch at the very end to protect the seeding, to kind of enhance germination a little bit, and to retain moisture. We did not water, and so that's one of the pluses of native seed, is that it doesn't really need to be watered. You know, there could be an extreme drought where, you know, things aren't going to grow and germinate, but that's the exception, not the rule. So because we didn't have any plants that we put in, we could just let the seed go and wait for the right conditions, and it just took off.
When you picked your plants, a lot of times natives will get to be a little bit taller, or some species. Did you have to be mindful of that so they didn't get too tall and shade the solar panels?
Absolutely. That was one of the main factors that determined what species were going to be in the mix. We always start out with wanting to use local ecotype species. So prior to European settlement, we want to use species that were native to this part of the state. So that's kind of how we start out. And then we think about what soils do we have here. We have sandy soils. What species are going to work great in those soils? How much sun do we have? How much shade do we have? In this case, we have both. And then what are the height constraints of the species? So all those factors go into creating the mixes.
I know that many people really like the flowers for the pollinators and the bees and everything, but you used a lot of grasses too.
Yeah.
Why?
Grasses are really the backbone of the prairie. They provide stability. If we didn't have any grasses here, there would be a lot of open spaces where weeds could invade and take over. So the grasses provide that structure, that stability, and are also very beautiful, especially in the fall of the year when they turn color.
Okay.
So.
How has this planting changed over the years?
That's a great question. With these native landscapes, a lot of times what you'll have is quick blooming species that start to bloom during the second growing seasons, like black-eyed Susans. And the whole site will be covered with black-eyed Susans, and everybody loves it, and it's great. But that's a pioneering species, which means they come in quickly and they die out kind of quickly too. So I would say the second growing season, we had a lot of black-eyed Susans blooming in yarrow. Those tend to fade out over time, and some of the longer lasting species then tend to take over at that point. So it's always changing, season to season, even week to week, it's always changing. A very evolving landscape.
How do you control the weeds? Because they get every place.
They do, they really do. We have specialized teams that come out and do vegetation maintenance at all our sites. And so what they'll do is they'll go up and down the aisles and spot treat certain weeds. So if it's an annual weed, it might just be mowed because it's an annual. Same with a biennial, you can control it by mowing it. You just want to prevent those weeds from going to seed. If it's a perennial weed, like thistle, or maybe like over there's a cottonwood growing, we want to treat those. We have to spot treat those with herbicide. Okay. So you stay on top of it. We come out here probably 2 to 4 times per growing season and just keep an eye on it and do that spot control.
What do you have to do in the fall to get them over the winter, or to help the plants get through the winter?
Absolutely nothing.
Really?
In fact, we like to leave it stand so we have a lot of refugia for the pollinators, and they can make nests in the stems and overwinter that way.
Mike, I know that with native plants, a lot of times they say that you should rejuvenate the plants, or you should burn the area in order to rejuvenate. But you sure can't do that here. So
Correct.
What do you recommend?
Correct. So in lieu of burning, the next best thing is to do a mowing. So about every 3 years or so, we'll come in the early spring of the year and do a mowing where we mulch up all last year's growth. That helps it break down and recycle those nutrients. It's not as good as a controlled burn or a prescribed burn, but it's pretty dang close.
What are the specific varieties, or some of the specific varieties that you picked in your seed mix to really benefit the bees and the pollinators here in the solar farm?
Monarda is one key species that we use a lot. It's very easy to establish from seed. A lot of flowers aren't, so that's one that we like to use, and the bees love it. Blazing Star, or Liatris, is another really key species. The monarchs love that one more than anything, along with the milkweed. Asters, we use asters as well because those are late bloomers, and so they provide that late food source for the bees. It's important to have a very diverse mix of flowers so that you have things blooming at all times of the growing season. So that's what we try and do.
What did you use for the early spring season plants?
We use Golden Alexander. Lupin is a little bit later, but that was one. Columbine is another one that we use. Those are harder to get by, come by most often because they're not available as seed as much as the later blooming flowers. But Columbine, I'd say, was a key one.
Did you have to take into consideration that there's some shade underneath the panels, and as compared to the sunnier aisles, as far as figuring out what to plant there and can plant out here?
Absolutely. So we did develop a couple of different mixes. One was more of a full sun mix that we focused in the aisles, and then we had a part shade mix, which is more of a kind of a savanna mix that we sowed underneath the panels.
Thank you so much, Mike, for coming and telling us how you established all of these pollinator plants.
Absolutely, and it was, let me just say that it was a total team effort working with Bolton Bees and Connexus Energy. We all collaborated and came up with a really nice project.
And it was really the first one, I believe, in the United States to do this.
Yes, that's correct. That's correct.
Well, thank you so much.
I have a question. My magnolia trees have a sooty, moldy residue on the leaves. What is this, and what can I do about it?
It is actually sooty mold. That's what it's called. Sooty mold will impact quite a few plants, and the mold itself is usually not a problem. It will not kill the plant, but the cause behind it could injure your plant. So we noticed it on our magnolias as well, and we had to do a little investigating as to why it happened. Sooty mold comes from honeydew, which is secreted either by aphids or scales usually. When they do, they secrete that sugary substance and the sooty mold grows on top of it. Now, scale on magnolia is actually a big problem. It might start out small and you might not see damage for the first couple of years, but if left untreated, the magnolia could eventually show dieback with just a few branches up to the entire tree. So we noticed on our magnolias that scale was growing all over the limbs and on about 4 of our trees this year. Unfortunately, as you look at the scale, it's under a hard, waxy substance. That's why it's called scale, and pesticides will not permeate into that part of the scale. So insecticides themselves do not work on the adults. Instead, you have to wait until August when the crawlers are out. Crawlers are the immature life stage, the young life stage of the scale. They look like little specks of dust, so you want to grab a white piece of paper, shake the branch, and a few crawlers will drop onto the paper. That's how you know it's time to treat. In Minnesota, crawlers usually emerge in mid-August and go through September or even October. That's when you need to treat. Here at the Arboretum, we'll use neem oil or horticultural oils, but we always follow the label recommendations so we don't end up burning our leaves. The oils themselves coat the scale, the crawlers, and suffocate them, and that's a good way to control scale. The adult scales that you still see on the twigs, the large scales with the waxy surface, those are the mothers of the crawlers, and they will drop off on their own. So we don't need to worry about them as they only last for 1 year.
Ask the Arboretum Experts has been brought to you by the Minnesota Landscape Arboretum in Chanhassen, dedicated to enriching lives through the appreciation and knowledge of plants.
We are now with Travis and Kiara from Bolton Bees, and we're going to learn about the beehives here at the Solar Gardens. Now, tell us, how did you get started with beekeeping?
Well, I first learned about beekeeping when I was living in China. I was there for a number of years, and one of my really good friends grew up as a beekeeper and asked me to join with her on a sustainable economic development project. I didn't know anything about bees at that time, but I knew Chinese. And so I got involved in there, and it was really it's one of those things that it kind of gets under your skin, and once it's there, you don't want it to be gone. You want to keep on beekeeping. So I moved back to Minnesota, and I continued keeping hives here. And then I met Travis eventually, and he has a background in fisheries and wildlife, biology interests, and was really able to look at it from a different perspective and looking at how do we have our bees overwinter successfully. Because that was one of the things that we were really being challenged with is, you know, we'd get hives and then they would die in the wintertime. So we were able to take a scientific approach to it and breed from the hives that survived our long cold winters. And we started a line called Minnesota Hardy. And then we started looking for locations for our hives because we were growing our numbers. And one of the things that we were always looking for is healthy habitat for our bees. And it's not always easy to come by good, healthy habitat. And so we started reaching out to companies like Prairie Restoration and knowing that they are purposely planting areas for pollinators and that is guaranteed healthy habitat. And she connected us with Connexus Energy, and we met with Sam and other people at Connexus Energy, and they said we could have hives here at this solar garden, and it was amazing. Our hives really flourish in healthy areas.
Was this the very first place that you set your hives at a solar energy area?
I believe this is actually the first bee yard at a solar array in the country. Actually happened here at Connexus.
Oh.
Yes, and this was our first, and yeah, the first.
How many hives do you have here?
So at Connexus Energy, we have 15 hives here right now.
Okay.
We had 15 hives here last year as well.
When do you bring the hives out here?
This year, you know, this is kind of for us, it's a spot to get them here at the time when the honey flow is kind of just catching on. So right in the early June, we brought our hives here.
Okay.
And
when do you take them back?
We'll keep them here probably until, I would say, September, October.
Okay.
We've got we consolidate our overwintering yards just to make for our late fall and spring work to be just a little bit easier. So we do bring them away from here, but our hives stay in Minnesota year round.
That's what I was going to ask, is what do you do with the bees over the winter?
So that's one of the things that makes us different from other beekeeping companies of our size, is that we don't migrate. We keep them in Minnesota all year long. And that allows us to just do survival of the fittest, see who survives. And we have, pretty good survival rate at this point, but when we started off, it was like 50% survive. Now we're close to like 90% survival rate now.
Right.
And we breed from those that survive, and we sell bees and we sell honey.
If I wanted to start a beekeeping, how do I even get started?
Yeah, so there's kind of two ways you can start a hive in Minnesota in the spring. You either get a package of bees or you get a nucleus colony. So nucleus colony is pretty much just a small starter hive. A package of bees is just a bunch of bees shaken into a ventilated box with an unrelated queen. Actually, all those bees aren't related either. A nucleus colony is actually a family, essentially. You have your queen, you have all of its brood at all stages, and all the bees on those frames. We sell nucleus colonies. So it's 5 frames. There's 3 frames of brood and 2 feed frames, everything covered in bees. And the queen is actually the mom of that colony. All the bees in there, they're all related.
Okay.
So that's the way we do it.
You had mentioned something about that you even breed or graft bees. What does that mean?
Yeah, so from the hives that we've selected to be breeder hives, so they withstand our long, cold northern winters. They have high honey yields, low mite loads, and favorable temperament. So those are the ones that we've selected. Like those are the best of the best, the cream of the crop. And then we take those hives and we graft from them. So the way it works is that worker bees, there's 3 types of bees in a hive. There's drones, there's worker bees, and then there's a queen. And most of the bees are worker bees, which are female. And they start off the exact same way a queen does for the first 3 days. So what I do is that I take that larva and I graft it. And I put it into a cell that would be a queen cell. So I'm changing the course of that worker bee's life and turning her into a queen. So that's one of the big things we do. And that's what we've done here also at Connexus Energy, is that we have our breeder hives here. So we've been able to graft from those hives and raise queen cells, which then we put into hives that we've split out, and we are able to grow our numbers, our cell queens, and things like that.
And when you take the bees back to your place, how do you treat them there to get them through the winter?
It's a lot of different things. You know, the mites are one of the biggest things for successful overwintering. You want to go into winter with very, little to almost no mites, if at all possible. There's always some in there. So there's various strategies to try to reduce mite loads. We do a lot of splitting later in the season. You get a brood break, really helps with your mite levels, and we've got some organic treatments and we've got some synthetic treatments that we do to reduce our mite levels. But aside from reducing your mite levels, you got to get your hive up to weight. It's got to have enough honey to get through winter, and also it's got to have ventilation. Those are really the biggest things. The cold typically isn't actually what kills a hive in the winter. They can handle the cold. They cluster up. That cluster, it just tightens as it gets more cold, and then as it warms up, they can expand. So they really can manage their temperature. But when they do that, they produce a lot of water. So a lot of times, actually, what can kill a hive in the winter is if they're able to get that moisture out of the beehive. So ventilation is actually another really big thing for overwintering.
When do you come and collect the honey?
We're actually scheduled to do that pretty soon here. I think August 3rd we're going to pull honey from this yard.
Okay.
We anticipate about 2,000 pounds, I would say, from this yard.
So where does it go from here?
So our honey house is up in northern Minnesota. On Bolton Bees, we have kind of a footprint down in the northeast metro and various solar arrays, and then up in northern Minnesota by the Park Rapids area. Yeah. Our honey house is actually in Monaga, Minnesota, a small town south of Park Rapids. So we'll bring our honey boxes up there, and we've got our extraction facility, and we'll extract it, and we keep all of our different honeys separate. So Connexus will be in its own 55-gallon drums. And then we actually made a custom jar for Connexus Energy. So they'll get honey in their own jar that tells their story. It's honey from their solar array.
Besides what the solar developers get in their custom jars, we also have surplus solar honey. And so what we've done with that is there's a brewery called 56 Brewing in northeast Minneapolis. They've made a solar honey IPA beer called Solar Armor Crush. We were in the state fair last year with the Minnesota Honey Producers Association, and they have a solar honey swirl ice cream.
This has been so interesting. Thank you very, very much for coming and telling us about the solar honey and actually how you have your bees here at these solar farms. This is great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Funding for Prairie Yard and Garden is provided in part by Heartland Motor Company, providing service for over 30 years in the heart of truck country. Heartland Motor Company, we have your best interest at heart. Farmers Mutual Telephone Company and Federated Telephone Cooperative, proud to be powering ASERA. Mark and Margaret Yankel Julien, in honor of Shalom Hill Farm, a nonprofit rural education retreat center in a beautiful prairie setting near Windham in southwestern Minnesota. Shalom Hill Farm, shalomhill.org. Diamond Willow Advanced Care Assisted Living, providing custom homes with smaller settings designed especially for high care needs.